Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I am with you today to talk about, the news that is all over the world, Afghanistan, Kabul, and what is the impact going forward. We have been documenting this very closely since August 15th. In fact, we have been following the Biden administration's foreign policy, not just in Afghanistan, but in Iraq and the rest of the world, since January 21st, when we saw that the Biden administration sent in American troops into Syria, increasing our exposure and inflating the international instability in the Middle East. And this has been a policy that has been continued since that time. Well, now here we are. We are a day away from the deadline for the United States and the world to get out of Afghanistan. This is something that was imposed by the Biden administration by itself on its own decision, without any input from world leaders. It was the United States, as stated by Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who said this was not what he had preferred. This was not what he chose to do. This is a timetable created by the Biden administration by itself and forcing the hand of every other nation in the world. And there are consequences that come from this. Big consequences that come from this. In particular, when we look at what was being stated as by the Telegraph, where we see they're mentioning just 5 days ago, Joe Biden's betrayal, allies can never trust this president again. Whatever kind of trust, whatever kind of foreign policy experience that may have been built up by Joe Biden in 47 years of time spent in the United States Senate, as well as vice president under Barack Obama, all that goodwill, all of that experience has been used up. He has made, if not enemies out of our allies around the world, he has shaken their confidence. And if there is no confidence, there is no ally. That is a fact. And this has an impact on the world going forward. If there is no trust in the United States, because there is no trust in Joe Biden, then what will the enemies of the United States, the enemies of NATO, of our allies in the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, and so many other countries, what will they do? What stops the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, from massing troops on the Ukraine and invading? What stops China from taking over Taiwan? What stops colonialization, globalization, this massive movement of violence around the world? What stops North Korea or Iran? Nothing, actually. Because the only thing that was stopping it before was the faith in the United States being willing to stand up for its allies, to be willing to stand with them as our agreements in NATO and otherwise, to stand for these countries and nations and to let the bad guys know, we will not let you just run ramshod around the world. Even for nations of global terror, like Iran, the world's largest sponsor of global terror, they too were in check because the United States would strike swiftly and with purpose against many of these terrorists. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. Was it detailed? Was it specific enough? Not always. But it was a measure of restraint being placed upon places like China, North Korea, Iran, the various terrorists around the world. They were held in check to some degree, and that helped increase net peace, or at least stability, in the world. But now we come to a point where that no longer exists. The Biden foreign policy, the Biden-Harris administration foreign policy, is indecipherable. I don't know what it is. I don't think anyone has ever known what it is. In fact, it was never spoken about in the 2020 presidential election. It hasn't been spoken about since January 20th, even as many changes to the United States foreign policy were made unilaterally, without notification to any of our allies, on timeframes that seem at best arbitrary and at worst politically motivated to try and promote a sense of accomplishment, to try and gain some advantage in the 2022 midterm elections and potentially the 2024 presidential election. If that's the case, it is a sad, sad reason. But there are other problems here. You see, we know for a fact that the consequences of this will not end. And in fact, by September 11th, the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attack, we may well see one of the worst disasters the world has ever seen. Now, you may have heard this. Many nations around the world have been mentioning, just yesterday, Sunday, August 29th, they've all come out. We've seen the United States, Canada, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Australia, have all come out and they've said that the Taliban, a group of terrorists who have engaged in attacks for decades, have promised that, don't worry, anyone who's left in Afghanistan, any Afghanis who have documentation and wish to leave, they can do so. Now remember, the United States, under the Biden administration, has provided the Taliban with a list of names of individuals who have worked with the United States for the last 2 decades. And many of these people have started to disappear. So this assurance from the Taliban saying that, well, we'll let them go, is doubtful at best. But let's say that they are being honest, that this is truly what they believe. Here's the thing about that statement, and this is from the Deutsche Welle, the German newspapers reporting, and what they say here is a joint statement from Britain, the United States, and many other countries said that the Taliban will allow foreign nationals and locals with authorization from another country to leave. We have received assurances from the Taliban that all foreign nationals and any Afghan citizens with travel authorizations from our countries will be allowed to proceed in a safe and orderly manner to points of departure and travel outside the country. This included assurances to Australia, Japan, France, Spain, and others. Well, here's the thing that's important in that statement. All foreign nationals. See, it's not just the United States. We already know that Britain, as we have seen, as reported yesterday in our live stream, we know that vice admirals in Britain have already admitted there are nationals from the United Kingdom that have been left in Afghanistan. We know for a fact that the Biden administration has been telling the American public since August 18th that they plan to leave American citizens in Afghanistan. And now it looks like we are being told by the Taliban and being acknowledged by countries around the world, Canada, Australia, so many others, that their foreign nationals in Afghanistan who have not been able to evacuate will be left behind. That means this is an international hostage situation. And I understand the assurances from the Taliban. And let's assume that for some reason, a terrorist organization that is willing to kill anyone, including its own people, willing to kill anyone in the world that does not believe exactly what they believe, They are willing to kill women because women are able to read and to drive. And in some cases, as has been reported, just because women did not cook a meal for Taliban fighters, if we are to assume and accept that the Taliban is being absolutely 100% truthful, let's make that assumption. At the same exact time, we know there are elements of other terrorist organizations, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, that are rampant and running around all of Afghanistan. We know that these different agents are willing to act without any notification to the Taliban, we believe, and without any authorization from the Taliban, we believe, and that they are willing to strike out on their own to attack their foes, individuals that do not believe what they believe. That is what ISIS-K has done. We've seen them commit suicide bombings to kill Afghan people and U.S. and as well as international individuals. Why do we believe they will stop after August 31st? In fact, we have no reason to believe that they will stop after August 31st. And these individuals are looking for the same list that we have provided, that the United States provided to the Taliban and possibly other organizations in Afghanistan. And they are headhunting not just the Afghani people, but American citizens, British citizens, Canadians, Germans, French, Australians, Japanese, Canadians. They're looking for all of these people to kill them, to use them as hostages, both as a message to the world, as well as to gain various political and economic benefits. And we know every world leader is aware of this. Every world leader seems to be clear, as it is the Taliban, that foreign nationals are being left behind. God knows how many. No one will say exactly. The number could be in the dozens, the number could be in the hundreds or perhaps thousands. And we have the 20th anniversary of 9/11 coming up. That is a day that Joe Biden has been targeting to be able to speak to the world, and in particular the American people, and say, look, what a great job I did. I ended a 20-year war. Isn't he impressive? Well, we would say, no, it's not impressive. Because now news is coming out from the Washington Post, reported today, August 30th, that the Taliban gave the Biden administration the capability to not have to do this, that we did not have to be stuck at the Kabul airport. In fact, the United States could have had control over all of Kabul, and that there could have been a more safe and more organized leaving or departure from Afghanistan. And this is something that we see. It's been mentioned by Representative Marsha Blackburn. It's being reported by Mark Thiessen out of, I believe he's with Fox News, but also more importantly from the Washington Post, as they stated here, quote, we have a problem, the Taliban official said, speaking with U.S. officials. We have two options to deal with it. You, the United States military, take responsibility for securing Kabul, or you allow us, the Taliban, to do it. Throughout the day, Biden had remained resolute in his decision to withdraw all troops from Afghanistan, which continues. The collapse of the Afghan government hadn't changed his mind, and it still does not. General McKenzie, aware of those orders, told the Taliban that the U.S. mission was only to evacuate American citizens, Afghan allies, and others at risk. The United States, he told the Taliban, needed the airport to do that. And thus came the decision between the Taliban and the United States, and therefore for the rest of the world, The only answer became, we have the airport, the Taliban has the city. It did not have to be that way. And what has come out of that decision, as we are learning from the Washington Post? Well, we've seen how many dead, how many Americans left behind, how many international individuals left on their own, struggling to get out of a nation. As we have been reporting, and as we mentioned on Sunday in our live stream, we know that there have been international agencies trying to rescue individuals, Christians and other Afghani individuals of interest and American citizens, and trying to get them out. Private individuals trying to get out, like the Pineapple Express, former U.S. military special forces going in that are in Afghanistan trying to rescue individuals. And we know, or it is alleged at least, that several of these organizations are being held back, that they are receiving resistance because the United States government doesn't want them to rescue individuals they are trying to save. That is troubling. So it's not just that the United States under the Biden administration have put our allies in an untenable situation where they have left their own citizens. It is not just that the United States is going to put its own citizens in harm's way. For other individuals who have voluntarily gone forth and decided to risk their own lives to save lives in Afghanistan, Americans as well as others around the world, the United States government is stopping them. And the only conclusion that can be made about that is because of the politics, because of the optics, because Joe Biden wants to take credit on September 11th by saying, I stopped the war. America is out of Afghanistan. And anyone who's left, well, they wanted to stay there. It was their choice to stay there. And we're not responsible. And you can't say that if there are private individuals going in and continuing to rescue people that the United States government said it can't rescue. As we have heard from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, the United States was not capable of going into the city, Kabul, to save American citizens and to rescue them, to give them departure from Afghanistan. Yet private individuals are doing what the American government cannot do. And now we understand why Secretary Lloyd said that. Secretary Austin said that. He did not want to reveal the fact that before this all came about, the Taliban offered the Biden administration the opportunity to control Kabul. It wasn't that the United States government can't do that, which no one believed we couldn't. It was that we had already made the agreement. The Biden administration had already authorized the control over the Kabul airport and nothing else. It was because the United States said we couldn't go into Kabul. That is the only reason why we left everything up to the Taliban to take care of. Because that's what the Biden administration wanted to do. Because they were worried about the final numbers, about attacks from ISIS, from Al-Qaeda, and maybe even some elements of the Taliban. Well, the result is we still have that. And we have now, it is now being reported just about an hour ago, or what was believed to be a suicide bombing threat from ISIS agents attacked by a drone. And it seems that either that initial explosion or the explosives in that vehicle killed 10 civilians in Afghanistan, some of them being children. And that this attack happened when the vehicle with these ISIS or supposed ISIS agents, well, it was in a residential area. I won't try and second guess the military on stopping a threat, a suicide bombing threat. Perhaps there was no better time, perhaps there was no better place to stop it where there would not be more damage, more collateral, more civilians that would have died. But we have to ask, how badly is that going to reflect on the United States? All of the Afghani people who are being left behind, who died because of the suicide bombings, because the United States wasn't willing to control Kabul. How much of this is going to lay at the feet of the United States when it did not have to happen this way? And our allies did not need to lose faith with the United States government as they have, as is being reported in international news, but not being mentioned to American citizens at all. And let me ask you, when it comes to September 11th, and there are, God forbid, there are Americans or Australians or Canadians or the French, Germans, or the British citizens, civilians who have been captured by ISIS or Al-Qaeda or any other terrorist organization that now currently is residing in Afghanistan. And those individuals are presented to the world on September 11th to be tortured, to possibly be killed, to be held for ransom if we're lucky. What is the world going to say on that day, knowing that Joe Biden and the Biden-Harris administration forced them out of Afghanistan on an arbitrary timeline that no one in the world had a discussion about, that the United States under the Biden-Harris administration forced them into, that the Biden-Harris administration forced these world leaders to leave their own people behind, that this never had to happen because the Biden-Harris administration had the opportunity to secure the city, to create an organized departure from Afghanistan, and they chose not to do it because of optics, because Joe Biden wanted to promote his victory. And we continue to follow this and watch this. The world, the United States, is looking at a hurricane, Hurricane Ida. And news media are more than happy to try and find something else to speak about rather than having to highlight the fact of the failures of the Biden-Harris administration day after day as it gets worse and worse. They're looking for a way to promote the same man that they promoted in the 2020 election. They're trying to justify the votes they asked American citizens to take. And it's embarrassing to the news media as well as to politicians. And they are looking for anything and everything to desperately speak about and distract from the abject failure that has happened and the international consequences. But for those who are looking at the international news, the consequences continue to happen. And on September 11th, we are fearful we will see the next stage of this debacle with international hostages, international deaths that did not have to happen. The 13 service members of the United States, the 12 Marines, and one member of the Navy corpsman, the two adult British citizens and a British child that were killed last week due to the suicide bombings of ISIS did not need to happen. Every death that has occurred after August 15th did not have to happen. I don't have the words for what emotion this is evoking. We should see resignations from General McKenzie. We should see resignation from General Miley. We should see resignations at Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. We should see many people resign over this, which is the least that should be done, because this verges on the criminal actions against our citizens and citizens around the world. But you cannot cover up all the facts. You cannot cover up the truth. Not my truth, not your truth, not an opinion of the truth, but in fact, the truth. The truth is the United States government, which had initiated this entire problem through an arbitrary date picked by Joe Biden himself, had the option to secure Kabul, to have an organized departure, and they gave that up. That's the truth. And that truth will remain, whether it's politically advantageous, whether it's good for the news media or not. And the consequences will continue far beyond August 31st, far beyond 9/11, far beyond any of the near-term political objectives this fiasco was meant to try and bolster. Now, you may think we have misunderstood. You may say that we have misunderstood the international news. You may think that we have misunderstood the statements by Joe Biden and the statements by the Taliban. And if you do, we would like to hear your words. But if not, we look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, to join us in our live stream as we speak about this, to watch throughout the week as we continue to cover this and other news events. And if you have found this to be useful, informative, please like, share, and subscribe so that we can continue to do the work that we are working so hard on. We thank you, and we hope you have a good day.